And again, one more quote, the great Warren Buffett says, "You don't find a way to make money in your sleep, you will work until you die." And
Mm.
that one really stuck to me because I was 58 when I finally learned about syndications. I was going around, I was working hard for a long time. And then once I found out about it, I thought, how did I not know? Which is why it's my mission to let everybody know. Because if I had started 25 years before that, my life would be totally different.
Tell me a little bit more about what makes a good team. And then after what makes a good team at the end of that, I want to talk about the tax benefits of
Yeah.
passive versus active, and tell me if there's a difference.
Yeah. So the components of a good team are, in my past life, I looked for synergy. And I actually have learned over time that that's not what you want to look for. You want to look for people that don't have your skill and need your skill. So again,
Yeah.
when I mentioned it, I sat and looked at the massive capital team. And again, one of the members was one of my first passive investment I ever made was a coach, and he has certain skill set. And then there's another person who has a different skill set and another person. And so all four of us have different skill sets. And then we hire people around us, or we have other team members that fill in those deficiencies of where we need it. And we've restructured, I used to say a joke that they all work late and I go to bed early. I would wake up in the morning and everything had changed. And at first I found that intimidating. And then I actually found that's how we're growing. That's how
Yeah.
we're growing. They're never afraid to try anything. And so that's super, super powerful way to be able to, so again, look for people that have, I'm in 34 syndications and I wouldn't call myself a good underwriter. Now, can I read it? Absolutely. Do I know what makes good numbers in an underwriting? Absolutely. But do I geek out on that spreadsheet? No, I don't. Me and Excel have agreed that we're just going to work in separate rooms. And if I open it, I guarantee I can break your Excel worksheet, but I can read it. So you have to learn the basic skills. But then
Yes.
there's other people when I watch like Sanjay and Shrar, and they're working, it's like magic.
Yeah.
They're moving this number
Yeah.
here, moving this number here. And I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to make this deal work or not work.
Yes. So, Trevor, I love that you said it's about finding the right skill set. I think oftentimes when people are putting general partnerships teams together, they invite anybody and everybody that can just raise capital. And then what happens is you need somebody for something and everybody's going, that's not my expertise. And everybody has their hands up in the air, which doesn't help the team going forward. So being super strategic on knowing who your other general partners are is critical to the success. So I've learned on some of my syndications that the teams were put together just like I indicated. So out of the 16, and I'd love for you to share this if it's not too personal. So out of the 16 syndications that we're in, we were one of those people when we first started syndications that we wanted to just jump in. Let's learn a little, feel comfortable enough, not an expert, but let's jump in and let's throw some money. Any money that we have sitting in 401ks or bank accounts that are just really not doing anything, right? But are going to give us those tax benefits, which we'll talk about last. So out of the 16 that we're in, I'd say four of them are in the toilet. About four of them we're probably gonna break even. 4 of them, we may make a little bit of money, maybe X our money. So some people would say, "Well, why are you gonna continue to invest if you got like a third of them in the toilet, a third that's you're just gonna get your money back, which you might as well have saved it, right? And a third that is gonna make some money." And I would say I learned a ton. I learned who I want on my team, who I don't want on my team. I learned how to create a team. I learned how to create how to get a good property manager, how to be a good asset manager, so on and so forth. And last but not least for the taxes. So talk to us a little bit about all those passive investments you're in and what does that look like? Does it look like a third, third, third? Or is it
Yeah,
is it
I'm not quite there, but I think some of it has to do with when I invested. So started 7 years ago because real estate is very cyclical, right? It goes up and down. And anybody who kind of got in 2021, we got hurt, and we got hurt by something that normally would never happen, right? Interest rates going from 3.5% to 8.5% on some of my deals. Those things made a lot of deals go upside down. Also, leverage. I was invested in a deal and the property is doing great. The problem was they went into it with a bridge loan. They had to get out of a bridge loan, which for those that may or may not know, they were at 80% loan to value because it was a brand new property that they bought off a developer. So you were able to get that because you were going to finish. So they've actually instituted their plan fairly well. Rent growth hasn't been quite what it is, and they're still hovering around. But they had to go out and get a different type of loan just because of the environment. They ended up getting what's called a HUD loan at 58% LTV. So instead of a cash out refi, it was a cash in refi. Now, the property had gone up $5 million in value. So do I
Mhm.
call that a loss or a win? It's just a readjustment. And unfortunately, I didn't have the cash to put into the deal. So you get diluted. And I understand
Yeah.
that's what happens. But at the end of the day, can we call that a bad investment? Or do we call one that had some turbulence? They did a good recovery. And the loan they got, they can get out of it with no prepayment penalties. So when the world calms down, which is starting to, I don't know how much yet still, but let's say in a couple of years, they can go get a more stable loan at a higher LTV and it loan to value just and we'll be able to get some cash out, right? So that's the way it is. So is that a problem? And then again, some of my original winners, timing is everything, right? They bought the deals, they turned them around, and they got rid of them just as the interest rates were going up. And I mean, that particular deal tripled my money in 20 months. So that's pretty substantial. I'd like a few more of those. That's
Yeah.
unrealistic. And I reinvested that money with the same operator. And even though we're cash flow positive, they're being conservative in today's market. And so
Sure.
they're holding the cash. So do I
Yeah.
call that a good or a bad? I'm calling that still a good investment. My money's there. The property's cash flowing properly. There's some things, the fundamentals are there, but they're being cautious. Now, the other side of the coin, I was in a couple of deals and
I was gonna say those 2 that you mentioned, those are wins in my book.
they're big wins. Yes. And then I was in another deal. And again, they got what's called the bridge debt, bought a distressed asset. They were not able to turn the distressed asset around quickly enough. And their interest rates went from 3.8 to 7.8. And they ended up couldn't even pay the bank and they got foreclosed on. Now, that's still some things that the deal sponsor did wrong, right? If they could have moved a little quicker, they bought something that was like 68% occupied and they got it up to 72. Big deal, right? If they could have got up to 92, we might
Right.
have been able to survive. And of course, then they ran out of cash because they had to pay more. And so, yes, that's a bad deal, but that was very much 50-50 operator and the world, right? I
Yeah.
don't even know if a good operator could have pulled that one off because there are some good operators that are stuck. But if I pulled my money out now, I'm going to miss the next biggest bubble, which is what's coming now again. Right? There
Yeah.
are some properties that we've just acquired lately at about 80% of what they sold for 3 years ago. So we're
No.
creating this new bubble, okay? And as long as you know what you're doing and learned enough about the history, that's where I'm going to recoup some of those losses, I believe, because now this is the buyer's market, right? Anybody who is buying in the seller's market, we all overpaid, and then our interest rates went crazy. And sadly, nobody would have predicted that. Nobody ever in a million years would have predicted that.
Yeah, yeah, I love everything that you said. So, what about the taxes? So, I would say, okay, even though a third of those syndications are gonna probably be favorable, I would say that overall, the passive investing that we have done is great because I got the tax savings for all of that. So, do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
tax savings, tax deductions, tax credits? People talk about them in different ways, but it's really a
so
deduction.
yeah, so again, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And if you never forget that, It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And even if you can keep it now and you have to pay it later, like if there's some recapture of depreciation or something, you shrewdly invest that money, you will be well ahead. So again, for you and I, we're real estate professionals, so we can take full advantage of it. If you're a W-2 employee, you can only take partial advantage of it. So you can write off those losses against your passive real estate income. So in theory, if you're invested in a cash flowing property, you're going to get a negative on your K1 of passive losses. And you can use that to offset all of your earnings, basically through and up to sale. Now,
Mm.
as a real estate professional, you know it and I know it. We get all of it. And so I haven't paid taxes in 7 years. And I was even lucky. I got let go with severance, and the severance came over 20 weeks, but I didn't have a real job. So I switched to real estate professional and was able to back declare all of that tax that I paid and get that back.
Yes.
So again, love him or hate him, right? When Donald Trump was debating Hillary Clinton, he proudly said, I pay no taxes. And he paid no taxes because he's a real
Yeah,
estate investor.
exactly.
And they just put back the big, beautiful bill, which puts it back up to 100%. And then if you're a passive investor, don't lose heart, because it's not a use it or lose it. If you
Yeah,
get put $100,000 in a deal and you get a $60,000 passive loss, you use it as you can, but it never goes away. It stays there, always available for you to use against some of the earnings coming in. So when you start getting those windfalls of deals that go full cycle, you can take advantage of it then, right? And
yeah,
so there is nothing else that you can invest with, that you're buying real assets, that you're using leverage, that you have cash flow, and you have the most favorable tax implications of any investment possible. It is the trifecta of all investing. And then even if you have to pay tax, it's capital gains, which is one of the lowest tax rates possible. So again, it's so powerful. You can't forget that, because again, remember, it's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep.
yeah, yeah. So with just to close this out, I have an interesting story. So one of our past tax bills, my husband probably worked 25% of the time for at a W-2, right? He worked 75% doing 1099 work, which is not taxed. There's no withholding coming out of that. I was the real estate professional. We actually were not taxed on his 75% of his income. And the little, I don't know, it was seven or $10,000 that they withheld on his W-2, guess what? We got all of that back, and oh, by the way, we paid no money on the rental income that we had on top of that. So when you think about that passive income, or that negative K1 that you have, that offset a lot. Right. So you kind of have to look at in more land equity capital, we believe in a diversified portfolio where you're looking at passive and active, and that you're also paying attention to your taxes. Because again, to your point, it's not how much money, it's how much money you keep in your pocket, right? So if I'm building my rental income and I'm not thinking about this negative K1 or passive investing or ways to offset those taxes, then I'm doing myself a disjustice because I'm just working harder to pay more taxes. So, anyways,
Absolutely.
Trevor, how could we end this call? One more great nugget for our viewers and listeners before we say goodbye.
Yeah, so I stole this one, but it's one of my favorites. Don't wait to buy real estate and wait. Real estate investing is a game of patience. It is a game of patience. It is not a get rich quick. It's a get richer slow. And you need to be patient and let your money go to work for you, right? And again, one more quote, the great Warren Buffett says, you don't find a way to make money in your sleep, you will work until you die. And that
Mm.
one really stuck to me because I was 58 when I finally learned about syndications.
Yeah.
I was working hard for a long time. And then once I found out about it, I thought, how did I not know? Which is why it's my mission to let everybody know. Because if I had started 25 years before that, my life would be totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, we always say if we only knew this 20 years ago.
Yeah, always.
I always tell my husband he wouldn't have met me 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyways, hey, Trevor, thank you so much for sharing all of your great knowledge and great success so far. And we appreciate you being on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Jacqueline and Melvin, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of Get Diversified. Please make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. Finally, stop by our website and follow us on social media. Ciao for now. Make it a great day, and we'll see you next time. And remember, get diversified.